All right, we're live. That means that people can watch the replays unless someone has somehow managed to sneak their way onto the live stream page and we haven't sent it out. So if you want to skip ahead about 2.5 to 3 minutes, you can do so, and you'll get to the start of this session. This is looking at intergenerational trauma, and it's a panel. We've got Ron DeBrito, we've got Patricia Aguirre. I never learn how to say this, don't I? And we've got Alexandra Vivoskaya and Nia Esterman. So 2 minutes till we start. Welcome everyone here. If you want to type in the chat where you're tuning in from, that's actually very interesting around this intergenerational stuff, because you can look at cultural stuff and where you live now, or maybe where your parents or family came from, or whoever else. So it's very interesting. So please rename yourself if possible, because that means we can actually see throughout the time. Otherwise you can write in the chat if you don't know how to. You can also type in how many sessions you've been to today if you like as well, so we have an idea of where you're at. Are you like flagging like me, or are you like, first session?
This is Steve's 5th session.
I think I've actually been on every session today. So not all of them like active, but
you're the hero, Steve.
It must be my intergenerational Aussie trauma, not wanting to show my vulnerability, and
or the strength of your lineage.
In the desert, I must be tough. And the dogs are wanting to get involved, so that's always nice. We recommend animals as well, and particularly dogs, because I like dogs better. And so, sorry, not sorry.
Thank you. Canada, with ancestors from Germany, Poland, and Hungary. I love getting that feel. Maybe Nir is also a fan of this, getting the sense of the background.
Yeah. Always very interesting.
Yeah.
These constellations and family things, people, they just love hearing about people's backgrounds, don't they?
We do.
It just makes things so much easier to understand when you put in background.
India by origin, currently living in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, looks like we're about on time. So I'll press start, do a little intro, press record, and then I'll hand over to you guys. And Patricia will have the questions. She's in charge today, so let me just do this. So welcome everyone to this session. So in case you don't know where you are, because sometimes we all get lost, this is a panel on intergenerational trauma, so how your ancestors are causing you to overreact. So today we've got 4 people on our panel. So we've got Patricia Aguirre, so she's a specialist in developmental trauma. She integrates her knowledge and experience with 20 plus years of Eastern philosophies with trauma-sensitive methods, I can speak, like transactional analysis, systemic therapy, emotional focus therapy. Then we've also got with us Ron DeBrito, and she's an MVC practitioner who's lived through marriage, divorce, and suicide, which drew her to nonviolent communication and embodiment. She's a joyful, playful elder and someone who's really, really fun to hang out with and eat ice cream on the Brighton beach. And we've also got here Alexandra Vivoskaya. She's over in Russia. She's a trauma therapist and the mother of embodiment in Russia. And also she brought tango to Russia. So she's a tango ninja and has been working with trauma since the USSR was a thing. And finally, we've got, where's my bio for you? We've got Nick Eastman. So he's a trauma therapist. He was born to a family of 2 Holocaust survivors and went through cancer and chemotherapy aged 22 before he went on to teach intergenerational trauma and family constellations to other therapists in Israel. As Mark says, he's uber clever and kind. So it's great to have all 4 of you guys here. And just a few things before we start. Please do share this event with your friends, with your family. There's a whole heap of sessions that are very specific that you might know someone specifically who it will apply to. So if you think of someone, send them like a WhatsApp with the link. I'll drop the link down there. I'll send them on Facebook, share it widely. We want as many people to benefit as possible. Of course, at the end, there will be a little product we'll offer around healing and trauma superpowers, but that's not the main thing, is just to share it with people and let other people sort of get goodness from it. Everyone who's here live will be watching has the all access pass, which means that you are here live and you can have the daily Q&As with Roger and Patricia just did a Q&A as well, and you'll get unlimited sessions. But if you're watching this on a replay and you want to have unlimited sessions, you can also get the all access pass, and replays will be available for several days after this event finishes as well. But if you're here live, please turn your cameras on so you'll get some feedback. Final thing, some safety stuff before we start. So just ask yourself, are you resourced right now? Would you operate machinery or drive a car? If you're feeling like, no, this session's probably not for you right now, so is watching kind to you? Particularly if you've watched a lot of sessions today, maybe it's better to catch on the replay and not binge watch everything. And also be mindful whether you'd be better served by one-to-one therapy. So this is education and not therapy. So it's not designed for people who are sort of in the worst of their trauma right now. So many teachers have been there, so there's no judgment, it's okay. But that might be better for you rather than staying here. So you need to be robust. And finally, if during your session something comes up, you tense up, you get agitated, you space out, anything like that, move, breathe, get up, do something. Just do something that will bring you to the present, even if it's a drink of water or patting your dog, just something that will bring you back here. And having said all this, this could actually be fun. You'll learn a lot. So afterwards as well, good company, movement, go in nature, that sort of thing will be helpful. So welcome to this session, and I'll hand over to Patricia and the rest.
Thank you, Steve. Super happy to have this very interesting panel. It's a subject that I'm personally very fond of, and I really love sharing this panel with people who I know are also very fond of this type of work. So we're gonna go and get a straight start into intergenerational trauma. So my first question for the panel would be, what would be your definition of what intergenerational trauma is? Why do you think it's important to talk about intergenerational trauma? Why is it when sometimes people say, like, when they hear me speak of, oh, this might be related to, actually we had, when they hear me say that this might be related to something with about your ancestors or generations, and they're like, what? Like, I have enough with my trauma and still I have to work with my grandmother or whatever. And it usually comes from that place of like, it's more work, right? But why would you say it's important, framing it into what intergenerational trauma is? So Ron, would you want to go?
Thank you. Oh, wow. Such a huge topic. And it's probably more widespread than we imagine. And the thing about this kind of trauma is when it's passed on through generations, I might not be in touch with the original context. So I might feel like I'm not functioning, but I can't figure out any reason. And we're kind of used to working with things being logical and having some sort of reason. And so this sort of trauma gets in the way of intentions, things we want to do, and we feel blocked. And it lives in us maybe in a way that doesn't have words. So it's really hard, to kind of pin that down and go, it's bigger than this is because of this. It's my actions are related somehow in a very mixed up way between the things that have happened to me and other things that I really can't explain. But something must have happened, and it requires a lot of, talking to each other to imagine what happened to my great grandmother that I am reacting this way today. So reacting from people who were in fight and flight and aren't here now. Thank you.
Thank you. Nir, would you want to go?
Sure. So as Ron said, it's a really huge topic. I think that the most basic embodied understanding I have about it is that when we are entangled with the traumas of our ancestors, we unconsciously feel as if it happened to us, even though naturally it didn't happen, or in some cases it happened to us and also to them. And so it gets bigger than it really is, if it happened just for us. And because we're not distinguishing what belongs to us and what belongs to them, the result is that we're essentially trying to fix what happened to them. As Warren said, we are reactive in their ways, and instead of looking for new ways and new options. And very often it feels like there's such a heavy burden physically pulling us downwards, or some ways, or making us feel like something is wrong in the backdrop of our life. But we can't really pinpoint what went wrong. It feels like it was always like that. And then when I realized that it's possible that I know how it feels to be a soldier going through an eternal war, even though I wasn't in an eternal war or any war. I was a soldier though. Because my grandfather was in the Second World War, and I know nothing about my grandfather other than that, and because my father was orphaned at a young age. And suddenly it all makes sense. And so I was like, oh, it's his war. Amazing. Now I can finally focus on my life, please. That's my answer as to what is it and why it's good to work with it.
Thank you, Nir. Thanks. Very clear, very practical. Vilya?
Yeah, I can follow all these answers. And one more detail, I found that quite often it's type of trauma create a very strong way of being, which is not mine and not about my life today, and not about my story and my history and what happened in my life. Like, for example, the example of war, which is well known, in fact, and which is very common for different people from different countries, or other situations which were like, I don't know, I wasn't, as to say, for example, most of us now have no experience of slavery, personal experience, but in some way, this feeling that I'm a slave is still here in my body, and I somehow experience it in any power dynamic or whatever. And it's very interesting, and it could be very painful still, and it creates my way of being today. And that's why I guess it's very important to find a way to make this difference, that it's not mine, and I can operate, I can do something with that.
Thank you, Vilya. Yeah, I really resonate with this definition of the sensation of something that's too big, that's too large, right? And I would just offer something. I mean, I love hearing your answers. It's super complete. And yeah, I would say, why is it important to make a reference to intergenerational trauma? Yeah, there's a sense that it's endless, that there is no possible easy solution right next door. And this feeling is connected to that we're actually trying to solve something that's bigger than us. So it's not in our hands. And that's the way it feels when sometimes we have a hard time finding a job or doing a diet or getting to the gym, or like these simple things. They sometimes carry this sensation of it's too heavy, or it's too difficult, or almost it's impossible. And that's usually a key indicator of an intergenerational tie. So it's really important to address that. I would say, to close my bit. Also, it's important because even when we are dealing with our own traumas or own personal stories, it's like you can see one side of it, and then another side of it, and then another side of it, and it's fucking endless. And it's again this feeling of, when am I finally gonna solve this thing? And sometimes that key is not in our life story, but in the past. And this actually takes me to this next question. What are some ways that intergenerational trauma shows up in our lives, right? Because sometimes we refer to in our generations ago, it was war, it was famine, or slavery, like Vilya mentioned, like this large scale stuff that we can label as, oh, that was big, right? But how can we see that we are connected to a war, that we are connected to slavery, that we are connected to famine, that we are connected to stories of deep poverty? How can we see that those are still having impact in our lives? Nir, do you want to go first this time?
Sure. Well, in a funny way, we don't even need to know the signs. It's always there. In the smallest thing, someone is always late. Nothing they do change that. They're always late. You go back into the history, you see that their grandparents were late for the trains to Auschwitz. They survived, now they're late. It makes sense. You go into romantic relationships and you notice the dynamics between people, and you notice that, okay, psychology already tells us that I married my mom and she married her father in some way, but actually sometimes I married my great-grandmother and not my mom, and this also affects. I had a session a while ago with a friend who was suffering from really bad back pain. And she tried everything other than constellations. And we did a constellation, which went to her intergenerational trauma. I won't go into the details, but after 2 weeks of not being able to sit or stand or walk, after half an hour, she could do all that. And after a day, she was like, oh, yeah, I did have a back pain. And it's just that so often when we try to solve things and it doesn't work, the pain continues, the difficulty continues, the loneliness continues, the anxiety continues, is because a very important part is not here, it's back there. You should go back there, do something, come back.
Thank you. Yes, it's sometimes as simple as that, right? Yeah.
Sometimes it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Vilya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, quite often it could be some type of narratives or some type of embodiment. So, which I can get from someone from my family. And for example, one time I worked with a very talented woman, and she had some issues around money, and we started to explore these issues, and we found a terrible fear about money. So it's really dangerous to be wealthy or good enough with money. And at that moment when we found that, say, oh shit, yeah, really, it was a story in my family that it was really dangerous. Or like, for example, a lot of women in Russia, we have, in fact, a lot of sexual violence historically here. And a lot of women, when they enter to their apartment building and go to the lift, they take the key like this. So to be able to to fight. And it's like, I do the same. I was sure that I'm the only crazy person and I have my personal story around this, but a lot of young girls do the same. How we do, why we do it, how we know it. And it's a lot of habits, it's a lot of thoughts, it's a lot of beliefs, it's a lot of traditions. And they're not about real life or personal story. And we can find it, we can see it, and we we learn to do to think like this, to do like this, and it's very natural way of embodying previous generation trauma.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Those things that you hold for certain, but nobody really said that, or not really as in like this is the truth, and they leave those truths live in us as sometimes like you read that somewhere, right? Like that's a real thing. That's very true. Thank you. Ron?
Oh, I want to follow Vilya with this reference to a sense of scarcity or too much or something, you know, how to behave around managing ourselves, or like compensating for something that has happened but not to us. And it can show up in the way we witness ourselves. Oh, I'm doing great, or I've got to do more, or this will never be enough. And that can also reflect in the way we might have an inner critic that says, oh, you must work much harder to get even beyond everything that we know already, because to get somewhere, you've got to be as good as other people. There's a real history, of course, in racial hierarchy, where people with brown and black bodies have learnt that they don't have dominion over their own bodies. And this is way, way back, hundreds of years. And interestingly, that might come from people with white bodies having done all the things they did to other white bodies beforehand. So that's part of maybe their trauma, which then was enacted up before they even went to, say, the African continent. It can show up in loss of motivation. You know, that the body that has been traumatized has kind of shrunk and diminished, and the muscles kind of lose their openness and ability to stretch into what is needed. And so sometimes there's a shutdown, you know, a loss of the ability to step into life fully. I can describe two males in my close family who seem to have drifted through life without being able to do ordinary things, take care of themselves, get a job. And the women are really proactive, very, very commonly, you know, they get the jobs, they serve themselves, they take care of the family, they serve the community. Another possible reaction, way it shows up is overreaction. Some little thing happens and no one else in the room is affected, but me it might be, whoa, you know, how can this be happening? And then the rage. So removing the shutdown response by some layer of healing might open up to the rage of, how are these things even happening? And that rage has been suppressed for generations. So when I feel it, it feels like that it's enormous, and I don't even know why it's that big.
Thank you. Yeah, we really could go on about how they show up in so many ways, right? From our personal lives and from something that I do myself, like Ron was mentioning, just my overreaction, that nobody else in the room reacts that way, but I do. And I was also thinking collective-wise, there are some things that are also like so embedded in the culture that we don't even see them as a part of a trauma response, right? I see that a lot here in Mexico. And it goes both ways, right? We are very known for like this laid back, chill, very relaxed, and we go with the flow. And this allows for people to be late because we have this expression like, it's just 5 minutes, it's just 15 minutes, right? And we fail to see how this also hinders us, right? Because also we have a lack culturally, a lack of being able to, this is important and we need to react, right? And that's also part of why the country has the conditions that it does in many senses, economical and social. And it helps you and it also hinders you. And until we make this we bring awareness to this, we can actually use also the good side, right, of those aspects. Yeah, Mir, go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yes. Yeah.
I want to say that it's not only solving the difficulties. There is lots of strength. There is lots of power. There's lots of support in being in touch with our ancestors. There are lots of gifts, and sometimes the signs are that we lack the gifts. We lack what we need in order to go forward in life, like Ron said. Or we find ourselves repeating the same dynamics with people, even though we don't want them anymore. And it's not only because of our childhood issues, it's also because these are the dynamics which are safe in our family or in our culture. And in order to change what feels safe, we need to go to what was not safe before.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to also speak on that. We have 2 points that I love that Mir brought up. Definitely the one about the strengths. I would love to end with this uplifting tone, so we can address that in a bit. Also, I would love to touch upon what Mir mentioned. When we recognize those patterns that belong to our families or to a pattern in the past, it's not sometimes, and I say to people, if you're lucky enough to just go ahead and, oh, I'm aware of that and I can change it, go ahead and enjoy that. But sometimes the ride is not as simple. And sometimes that ride, we find that some parts of the system will not be as friendly to our change. And we have to bottle up or like pack with us within our resources, being able to deal with stuff like guilt, right? Does anyone want to speak on that?
Well, survivor's guilt is one very good example, which I can sympathize with. We know this syndrome when people who survive some difficult situations feel guilt for surviving. But what is not so much spoken of is that their descendants also feel guilty, only they don't know why. Just feel like they should make up for something. And it never ends. Or if you look at things that we actually don't know why they happen, like depression. And why does depression happen? Well, we can say it's the chemistry in the brain and some difficult stuff in life, but we see from the intergenerational perspective that very often it's the weight of the loss and the grief which were undigested by previous generations, which pulls us down. And when we acknowledge and get in touch with these parts of our family, or when we agree to do the work, as you said in the beginning, Patricia, we agree to do the work for them and go through that grief ourselves in whatever way, then suddenly something is lifted from us. And many physical and mental issues are actually have very strong roots in what was unbearable in past generations. Sometimes in striking ways. Sometimes you see a physical symptom going down each generation, you think, oh, it must be genetic, but actually it's not, or not mostly. Let someone else take. I have too many examples.
I really liked when Nia, you mentioned about the gifts that it brings. You know, there was an early part of my life when I brought up my children, I did not have any healing at that time. So it's like a picture to me of how I used to behave in reaction in the left hemisphere without any awareness, without being connected to the body. And therefore, it's no surprise now, you know, trauma is stuff that's happening for too long, that is too fast. So I work with slowing down and with compassion, because I had to have those things to heal myself. And then, you know, it's kind of created this whole new career that I have because of the learning that I needed for me. And the learning that I needed for me came from a huge depth of pain, as you know, a sense of loss, a sense of aloneness, that gradually it's like very little layers, very tiny movements of changing that. And so the quality of attention to little things in society that tends to just jump over little things, like noticing feeling cold, or noticing that it's hard to move, or noticing that I need to control everything because there will be no resources. I have to bring all the resources. So those things are really familiar as intergenerational, showing up in my present life, mixed up with my own personal history, of course. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I'll add something. You know, this topic of this grieving, which wasn't finished from parents, grandparents, grandparents. For example, in Russia, it's extremely huge. This feeling of grieving and unburied soldiers, and I can keep it for myself, and I can grieve in any situation because I have this need to do it. And this is one option. And the other option, I don't want to do it. So I go to anger and to fight, to defensive mode. At any moment, every time when someone tried to touch this topic or tried to touch these painful spots, and that I can see around me now in Russia a lot. It's a huge thing, and it's almost official policy now. And because don't touch, it's too painful. Like, really, I have this feeling that it was my Second World War, and that it's I was killed and buried in one of big Ukrainian Jewish fighting, so killing, and like it was me. And it's really strange and painful and necessary to be changed somehow, because it influences a lot on the whole life. In a very small moment. Can I feel joy? Can I celebrate? Can I talk to people from Germany? Can I agree that other countries have suffered during the Second World War and after, and at all, etc., etc., etc. It's a huge mindset. So personal and collective.
Thank you, Vilya. I really appreciate you bringing up this topic. I think it's one of the most beautiful healing aspects of this work, which is reconciling both sides. And it's a challenge as a facilitator, because I mean, I guess we're all on the same boat if we are on an embodied approach to this, that you actually have to do that reconciliation yourself to be able to help people into these steps of reconciliation. Otherwise, it's just unknown, weird territory, right? And it takes so much insight to be able to see the other side, right? So if in our system there were victims, or our system had the perpetrators, we can also feel the pain of the victims of our own ancestors. And at some point, I guess we have all of that from both. And from my personal experience, it's one of the most beautiful experiences to be able to get to that place where you can see that sameness in the opposite. And it doesn't come from a place of everything is beautiful, bad things don't exist, and this type of bypass that sometimes we try to use to get to this place of sameness. But it's a sameness that embraces all of our differences. And it's beyond that and through that we can get to this place of actually being able to see and to see what's in front. Thank you. So I guess it would make sense to step into this next question. We tend to focus a lot, if I have a disease or an illness, it has to do with my family, because it's easy to link the genetics to the generational. And there may be links, but we don't take it as simple as that when we address it from a transgenerational perspective. But we tend to associate all of the negative symptoms in my life. And that's the way that I see this concept of what's passed on from behind. And Nir touched on this earlier, when it's also good to widen that perspective. And yes, on a practical sense, I know that we come into this work because we're trying to solve something. But then we narrow that perspective, and it's good to remind ourselves that it's wider than that. And we also inherit strength. And we inherit a very important aspect, which is life itself. And the strength enough to, I wouldn't say solve and conquer and go beyond our issues, but being able to face them and carry on life with them. And this is a very interesting parallel line alongside with dealing with your symptoms and your traumas, right? Would you like to add something around that? Anyone who would like to go? Nir?
I will be last this time. I will speak first.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Yeah.
I can. It's like a medal with both sides. Yeah, we have family intergenerational sensitivity and, in some sense, weakness, and at the same time we have a lot of strength and a lot of experience of, as to say, in fact, the legacy is surviving. So it's the power to survive, it's the strength to live, and a lot of beautiful and very useful qualities that we also took from our family, from our previous generations. Like it could be sensitivity, it could be paying attention, it could be caring, sometimes over caring, okay, but still it could be some type of activity, like doing something, creating something, finding new ways, etc., etc., etc. So or independence, a lot of things. And I guess it's quite useful every time when we touch these family traumas or intergenerational traumas, to see both sides. And one more thing, it could be in fact very supportive if I feel this connection with previous generation of my family or of my people. It likes roots, and it could be very, very supportive. So it's quite useful to see both sides.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear. And yeah, I really noticed, for instance, my own history is of about 50% Indian, 50% African via Trinidad in the West Indies. And my parents came to England. And so in a way, that was a big forward step into getting different education for themselves, you know. But the thing that actually I'm aware of is that the resources were still in Trinidad. In the huge amount of extended family were not here. So there is, as Vilya said, there is this interesting mixture of that sense of stepping forward, you know, taking the privileges that are available here in England, making something new with them, growing and learning. And yet there's also a sense of loss. And actually something that really nourishes me is to remember that I am connected with them, that there is a sense in which they're right there. And just simple, you know, all of the things, the earth, the air, that remind me that they experience the same things that I experience. And that is such a resource for me of feeling connection where I would have previously not felt it. So there is so much learning and growth, even in this sense of disconnection, because that's how they survived. You know, they survived. I'm here. So connecting with the basic things that keep us going, so vital and so rich. And it's really inspires me, that juxtaposition of both the quality of lack and loss and aloneness and the powerful availability that is within us, the surviving, and how to do it, and how to do it day by day. And it's often not the big things. It's really the little things.
I completely resonate with what both of you said. I would like to say that, to add that I love this option of looking backwards in time and asking, do I have an ancestor who knew how it felt to be safe? Do I have an ancestor who knew how to deal with money? Do I have an ancestor who knew how it feels to be sexually free because they were not abused? Do I have an ancestor who didn't only survive but thrive? And the list continues. And each one of these ancestors, even if not one has it all, has such a rich gift for us, for our life. And sometimes we need to cross the gaps of the trauma in order to get in touch with these ancestors. And sometimes we can just leap over and get in touch with it. And both are important. I think one of the most amazing healing I've ever received / done to myself was in a session where I got back in touch with my father's family. My father was orphaned at a very young age in the Holocaust. And until that session, it always felt like, yeah, there was my dad's family. And after that, and then a blank. And after that session, it felt like the like my neurology changed, right? Like the dendrites in my brain went like, again, like roots through the chasm that opened then. And through it, I connected not only with specific ancestors, but with the entire world. It was a huge healing of a huge trauma. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I would add on this subject. I usually, if you've heard me on other sessions on trauma, or actually, yeah, I usually refer to it in trauma, that one of the perspectives that I usually share is not how I am flawed because I have this thing that I do or that I can't do, but more like, oh, I understand that at some point there was no other way for me to survive in this type of household, but to remain silent, right? So as an adult, then I have to deal with the conflict of not being able to assert myself and ask for what I need in my relationships. And sometimes we see it like, oh, I am so stupid, I am so dumb, I am so, all of these terrible labels because I cannot speak up, because I cannot put words to my needs. Like, how flawed would I be because I cannot say, hey, you're hurting, it's hurting when you do this, right? And it's so simple, and I should be. And an approach that I really found helpful in my own healing was, it made sense that at some point in my life, I shut up because it was just too big to handle. Or what I would have brought up in my family would have been too much for my parents to handle. And it makes sense. And from an intergenerational perspective, I also found this link. And I saw how, yes, like the need to complete processes like grief or other processes are interrupted and find the need to be continued by newer generations. I also found that there was another part of this where we have a need to be connected to everyone, and we have a need to feel everyone as a whole. And if that means I connect through pain, I will do it out of love. Yes. Yes, thank you. So we are ready to close, and I would really love it if we close on an uplifting tone, and offer one or two or however points you want to make as of what can be done, what can we do when we want to deal with these things that I know are showing up in my life and that I know that are related to my family stories. So what can be done? Who wants to go? Ron, do you want to?
I need to unmute. Definitely to let these things be articulated. It's scary, but to somehow bring it to life, and to seek help, actually, to seek the people who can bear to hear it. In a big way, something obvious is to explore family constellations, for instance, or find a coach or a therapist. But even just in a little way, to even, to read stories, or to notice if you're watching a film where your heart starts melting, to notice the little parts of ourselves that really need to be spoken and seen. One of my traumatic things of childhood is to not look at people in the eyes because of not being able to witness. To go slowly and to respect the vulnerability that's there, and to live with it and to be with it, to love it, completely love all of the parts of us, to integrate them little by little.
For me, it's trying to be curious. And if you found something, or if you notice, or if you, I don't know, I have some bad habits or some qualities I don't like too much. And the curiosity here is what it's about. And if I remember that it's not necessary that everything is about me, that I'm not alone. There are a lot of people around, and there were a lot of people. There are a lot of people behind my spine. So maybe I can share this with others. And if I'm curious here, I can see both sides, something that I enjoy and something that I don't like, something that makes me happy and something painful. And yeah, it takes additional resources sometimes to develop this curiosity. But for me, it's a way, yes, therapy, I don't know, circling, some cultural inquiry, etc. But yeah, just a way to find this curiosity. What's that? What's this about?
So a very practical one is asking ourselves, what does this belong to originally? It's amazing how many times these questions saved my day. And for the professionals among you, it's good to notice what triggers you in your clients and whether you lose center with your clients, because that has to do with your shadow, and your shadow was created by the traumas of the previous generations. Family constellations are an amazing modality to deal with intergenerational stuff. And essentially, the most basic thing is simply to be able, as Ron said, to look at it, to acknowledge it, to be in touch, and not to accept this, we don't talk about that, or it's in the past, and let bygones be bygones. So yeah, it happened, and therefore I want to be in touch with that. And the more we're in touch with it, the healthier we are. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear different resources, because definitely I will go to family constellations. When I found the method, I was like, yes, this is one of the places that feels like home to me, because it gives you very practical access to figure out where does that belong. And a key part of this is to go into it knowing that even when something belonged to the past, I carry a part of that. So it's this beautiful duality that I love, of acknowledging that it belongs in the past, but it's not. And this is actually something that you find very commonly in clients, like, this is not mine, take it off of me, and I'm beautiful and perfect and innocent. And while yes, we're all perfect and beautiful and innocent, in everyday life, we also carry the remnants of that. So even if there's an anger because my family was involved in some sort of like, I don't know, in my part, the north part of Mexico where I live, almost all of our families were involved with the Mexican Revolution at some point, right? And this was like less than 100 years ago. So of course, lots of issues come around anger, around shame, around having done lots of things that revolutions and wars make you do, actually. So even when I carry that anger that belonged to them, I also have to be humble enough and human enough to recognize the damage that I have done and the hurt that I have done through my anger and through carrying that anger. And that's not so easy to do, to recognize, yes, it belonged to my past, but it takes a humility to say the life that I live and that I have had to come through the stories of those people. So it came with the package, and I am adult enough and I am sufficiently resourced, even when I'm not resourced, to deal with also my part in that. And even when I acknowledge that I carry that anger or that pain or that whatever pattern that's going through me, I might also pass that along still, even when I'm trying not to. And to me, I am still amazed at how, when you touch into these spaces of humility, of this humanness, it's like, we do our work, we show up, we do what we know we have to do, but life has also an agenda, right? And that's also getting in touch with the intelligence and the love and the magic of a system, of a family system. So closing words. So we're just about to wrap up and pass it on to Steve. So who wants to start with closing words?
Thank you, Patricia, for leading this panel. Thank you, everybody, for being present. And I wish us all a happy reunion with our ancestors.
Yes, thank you to Patricia and all of you. I'm just so grateful for the chance to touch these places, to integrate them, to allow them to be present, and to, as you said, to bring them fully into our present moment, our present lives, with real compassion for all the things that we lost, what we dropped the ball somewhere along, and to love that as well, to love ourselves, and to have compassion for those parts too. Yeah, it's been really beautiful to be present, to be whole, to be love. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the chance to have this conversation and to think and to listen to all of you and to read these amazing comments in chat. In fact, thank you very much for all of you guys. Yes, just thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who joined, who was part of this session. And I feel very lucky to be a part of this panel with these wonderful people that I admire as humans. And I admire your work, all of you guys. So I'm just super lucky to be a part of this. Thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed the conversation that came. I love trusting that at that moment, it will take hold of my list of questions, and whatever needs to happen will happen. And thank you to Steve, who's holding everything always from the background. So back to you, Steve.
If I can do it. All right. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Nia. Thank you, Vilya, for this. It was a really touching session. I just love that this can happen. So thank you so much for putting this together. And Patricia came up with these questions, and there was a nice discussion beforehand about what was going on. So Vilya just did that before. I think that's something, if anyone's feeling a little bit spaced out or agitated or in some way stressed, feel free to just have a little wriggle, get up, move a little bit, do something to resource yourself. It can be quite tough. sometimes listening to some of this stuff in a session like this. So take care of yourself. We've actually got a session coming up straight away with Ilan, but of course there will be replays, so don't stress about that. If you're feeling a little bit under-resourced, you can watch the replay after if it's something you're really keen on watching. Just a couple of little closing things before I give you a couple minute break before that. We might just take a couple minutes, started a couple minutes late, but do share this, particularly this session or any others. Share this with friends, share it with family, particularly. And think of how you could share it. So I'll drop the links there in the chat, but you could share it just over Facebook, you could WhatsApp someone or SMS them or anything, just to let everyone sort of hear this. I think there's a lot there to be said that could benefit everyone. And there's some more on like superpowers and healing in that second one, trauma is your superpower. But you can check it out if you're curious about that, how you can build superpowers from that. I'd also invite everyone as well, if you feel like doing so, type in like one thing in the chat that you really heard from today's session and you want to take away from it. Or if not in the chat, if you don't want to put it publicly, write it down somewhere for yourself. Just help really guide something that you bring out of this, and that's what our aim is just to help people in some way. So as I said, there's a lot of sessions still coming up. Maybe I'll just share this and hopefully not overwhelm everyone. But as I said, next we have, let's see if that's going to work. As I said, next we have Ilan's session, What You Don't Know About Trauma and How It Can Hurt You. There's also one from Mark, Wasn't That Bad, How Trauma Affects Even Normal People. And Patricia is coming up as well, again, with The Subtle Damage Emotional Abuse Leaves. There's also some connected sessions to this coming up. And if you have any questions as well, Patricia is doing the daily Q&As, as is Roger Mills, an EMDR PTSD specialist. He's doing them at 12 p.m. UK for anyone who's awake at that time. We've also got another panel coming up on Wednesday afternoon UK time. Of course, replay to be available if there's anyone from North America, around sexual violence. And like Ron's back tomorrow, for example, doing Taking Back the Power Back, Trauma and Forgiveness, which is obviously very much related to this topic, along with Vilya in the morning, again, very related, trauma and culture. So we welcome you to those sessions and hope you get benefit from this, share it around, and really thank you for coming here. So with that, I'll leave this room open, but I'll just invite everyone to take a little break if you are going to stay on. If you want something to do, feel free to get up, move around, grab a drink. You could do something with your eyes or something, relax them out, soften the peripheral vision if that's helpful, if you're feeling a bit agitated, or the opposite, see if you can deepen your breath into your belly, slow down, something like that, depending where you're at and what you need. All right, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Vilya, and thank you, Nia. And Amia's coming back as well. I didn't mention his session. He's also doing another session at, when is your session, Nia? This time tomorrow. Why am I always sick? Trauma and persistent health issues. So Nia's going to be back as well. So see everyone there, and I'll restart in like 2 minutes.
Gracias.